thank you very much for joining us on this very special edition of the Unmasked series. Tonight, we host a very distinguished lawyer, a leader, but above all, the president of the Uganda Law Society. We need to have a status update as a nation, even as the president. He will be addressing us. We are really hoping that he can be able to end the lockdown. So joining me tonight is Mrs. Pheona Wall. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I want just to greet our viewers because I know they are very excited to be having you.
Good afternoon, viewers. I'm very glad to be here. I bring greetings from the Uganda Law Society.
Yeah, and I know you've been doing a lot of tremendous work over the past 1 month. We may not go into some of the, I've seen this week you are doing a lot of major things with the Ministry of Lands, I think. But above all, I saw you coming out to fight for the essentiality of the legal profession.
Yes.
The essentiality of the legal profession in the context of the lockdowns, is it something that we have lived up to?
I think that as Uganda Law Society,
yes,
I think that we've done our best in a situation where our role is not recognized, or whether intentionally or unintentionally. There's a continued sort of deliberate effort, I think, on the powers that be to keep reinforcing the fact that legal services are not essential, which is ironic because during the last lockdown we had so many problems because first of all you have regulations that are coming up, then you have the security forces overzealously enforcing these regulations and having increased arrests and incarcerations, and then there's nobody to help those people that are in there, to help the due process of the law to go forward. The DPP did not even have transportation, so the prosecutors could not even sanction any cases.
Because of the lockdown?
Exactly. Yeah. So it was ridiculous because we need to understand how important the legal profession is in this country. The powers that be saw it very important long ago to ensure that one whole arm of government is made up of lawyers, and that's the judiciary. You can be a parliamentarian when you're a lawyer. You can be in the executive when you're a lawyer. But you cannot be a judge unless you're a lawyer. You cannot be a judicial officer unless you're a lawyer. So the legal profession needs to be recognized, not because we want to just be recognized, but because for the rule of law to exist, we need to have everybody that is involved in the whole life cycle of the enforcement, the protection, etc. of human rights to be involved. So I think as a country, we've not really lived up to our expectations. Yes, of course, as Uganda Law Society in both lockdowns, we've advocated for and successfully been accepted to move around, although limited, with limited access. And I still believe that there's no need even for limiting our access. We're only 3,700 in this country. That means 19,000 Ugandans have access to one lawyer. And those numbers are terrible, especially seeing as about 90% of those lawyers are in Kampala. So at a time like this, when there's blatant human rights abuses in the hospitals, you've been hearing what's been going on. We have poor people that are suffering a lot of abuses on the streets from the corrupt traffic officers and all these things. We have a lot of problems that are coming out right now. If there's a lockdown, last year alone, about 3,000 young girls were defiled by their families in the districts of Wakiso, just Wakiso area alone. So that shows you that the vulnerable are at their most at their greatest risk right now. This is when they need lawyers. This is when they need people who are going to speak for them. This is when they need policemen to protect them, to focus on protecting them as opposed to, just only showing up to arrest people. This is the time that we need magistrates to ensure due process, to ensure that instead of incarcerating innocent people who've broken, they're not innocent, maybe they've broken traffic or whatever regulations, is the question to incarcerate them or to give them bond and bail and let them go home and just to avoid, first of all, increasing the risk of COVID infections, and also to allow for the fact that they're not going to probably appear in court anytime soon, so they shouldn't be in prison for nothing. Yeah. So I think that, no, I don't think as a country we've met our expectations. As ULS, we've been working full time.
Aside from that, in terms of advocacy for the Uganda Law Society has had a tainted history of being reduced into mere paper tigers when it comes to responding to key advocacy issues that concern the ordinary citizens. Yes. What is the difference between your regime and the previous regimes, especially that you find yourselves in a very unique time of the lockdowns? Are you not going to turn out to be mere paper tigers who are not actually having any fruits?
First of all, ULS has never really been a mere paper tiger.
But I could give you history and facts about that.
Yes, there've been moments when we, maybe the most we could do in a situation is write a statement. Yeah. But there've been moments where they've done amazing things. I think you remember the Black Mamba issue, all the lawyers stand up and demonstrated at court. We had we went to court over the court-martial issue in 2005 and we got a very good decision. Sorry, I think 2016. Then this time, the Judiciary Administration Bill actually was passed because Uganda Law Society went to court.
What is that unique thing you are doing?
So what we are doing right now in the lockdown, first of all, and I can't help but start from just last year, elections, around the election period, because we did a scientific election. That was also something unique. Yeah. So in the scientific election, we were observers, election observers. We released a report recently. Not only were we election observers, but we also created a task force, a 100-man task force, which was all over the country. And we released that report in March. It was for the 3 months up to March. And we were able, actually, of the 700 disappearances, you remember that I'm putting it in caps because people kept saying this and that and that, but the ministry confirmed that there were 700 people that had been incarcerated between the months of December and March. We, as the Uganda Law Society, were able to trace and help and represent about 108 of them and get them out. Right now in the lockdown, as I speak, all our clinics are open. They're fully operational. They're not fully operational, but we are doing our best to make sure that anybody that needs an urgent application, a certificate of urgency, to avoid evictions, we're protecting people from evictions. We represent about 65,000 Ugandans as we speak, and about 10% of the prison population right now is in our hands. There are cases, and I'm very, as we speak even, one of the things that we've done is we've made sure that the things that matter are kept at the forefront of every conversation. And that's why you see us almost on a daily. We're using the media, we're partnering with the media. I want to thank the Fourth Estate for always giving us a platform. We've been really advocating for these things. We've drafted petitions to the ministry. I think you've seen us speak out on almost everything as it came out. So for me, that's, I don't think we've been a paper tiger in this short period. I think that we've been present. I think we've been the voice that needed to be heard, and I think that where we could use our what should I say, our tools of trade in court, we have, because as we speak right now, the major issues that we're dealing with in the land, we're in court already on them.
Talking about the things that matter, one of the things that matter is accountability in this time. I have seen a couple of government officials who have come out to say that in times of the pandemic or in times of crisis, we shouldn't be so hard on them to ask for accountability. And we know that accountability obviously leads to the loss of massive resources, and I've seen you ably speak out on this. Loss of massive resources which would have helped the indigent, which the ULS actually is saying that they should be helping. So we are in a lockdown. There is massive misuse of government resources, and this doesn't seem to be a point that the ULS has come out to clearly advance and call out the government on? Doesn't that then justify that
we are actually in court
tiger?
Right now? We're in court over the right to health. When we saw the oxygen shortage and we saw the fake vaccines and we saw what was happening, we actually, our health and the law cluster got together and already SEHAD has gotten this ruling that says that the prices of medical services should be regulated. SEHAD is actually the head of the health and the law cluster in the Uganda Law Society. So these are efforts that we're putting out right now. As we speak, we are looking into the matters of the fake vaccines and we're going to hold somebody accountable for that. We are actually looking at cigarette smoking. You know, one of the problems that we have right now is that the people with respiratory issues, with already compromised respiratory systems, are the ones that are affected greatly by COVID. And when you see, we were not happy when we saw all these new taxes that they're introducing in a lockdown, when we're probably supposed to be getting some incentives. Now, at the same time, tobacco regulation is not following the rule of the law, the letter of the law. The Ministry of Health is supposed to be regulating tobacco. And it's supposed to be regulating tobacco in such a way that we earn about maybe 30 billion in taxes. Right now we're losing 30 billion from non-regulation. So as Uganda Law Society, we're also looking at that. We're saying that you're adding taxes, you're spending a lot of money on COVID, and yet if you were to collect these taxes from the tobacco giants, the 30 billion, it could do a lot for our efforts in health. But we've also seen some ridiculous things, like what is happening with now the monies that are being released to Parliament right now and everything in the midst of a lockdown where we don't have oxygen, we do not have vaccines. I think for me, we've been severally speaking about these things, but what I am saying is what we have done is on the health issue, at least, we're already in
again, Madam President, the ULS has found itself almost acting like any other accountability institution in this nation, which doesn't seem to go for the big dogs. A recent report released by the Initiative for Socio-Economic and Socio-Economic Rights stated clearly that we took a grant from the African Development Bank, from the IMF, from the World Bank. One of the purposes of that money was to recapitalize the Uganda Development Bank. And that money was actually shortchanged into something else. And one of the key incidents that was quoted by the media and even by the Auditor General's report was money given to one businessman who owns the Akamwesi hostels, who claimed he was indigent and took over 40 billion Uganda shillings. Now, you people in the Uganda Law Society seem to only be talking about the simple things.
No, I do not agree. I do not agree with you at all, because when UDB went to Parliament, Parliament told them to go and speak to the private sector.
But that report was not released.
No, listen, because you see, the problem of the report not being released, I want to talk about as Uganda Law Society. What we did, we attended that engagement with UDB. We held them to account in that meeting. And they said that they actually explained how Akamwesi came to do what? Came to get money. Apparently these applications that had been made in 2016, and it wasn't about the stimulus package. It was what are they called? Areas of applications. There were applications from way back for funding, not for the stimulus package. Apparently, which is very disappointing, almost nobody has earned anything, has gotten any money from the stimulus package. The only people that were paid out after that payout, Uganda Law Society, I'll tell you this, engaged UDP. And that's when we got the information that the stimulus package had not been touched. What has been touched is money that people had applied, their Akamwesis had applied much, much earlier on. So for us to have this information is because we went looking, we went asking for accountability. But this is one of our cardinal roles as Uganda Law Society, and our greatest disappointment. And we actually had a what do you call that? An engagement about this on NBS, the morning show, where we talked about the fact that the stimulus package has not helped anybody. We're not seeing any results.
Yeah.
We're not seeing accountability. We saw about 500 million that was stolen in May last year. Nothing has been, nobody has been brought to book. As Uganda Law Society, we've released several statements on that same money. But you see, one of the things we need to understand is that there are certain things that cannot be done in a vacuum.
Yeah.
We have a new parliament right now, and our engagements, we had a meeting recently with the deputy speaker. Our engagements are really to what is this parliament going to do for us?
Yeah.
Are they going to really hold these people accountable? And I'm hoping that we're going to see something different. But as Uganda Law Society, our job is to advise. Our job is to bring these things forward. Where we can go to court, we've gone to court. But on issues of public accountability, I do not think we've been quiet at all.
Talking about public accountability, I love the example you quote from the parliament. Just about a few weeks ago, Parliament was suspended for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In the midst of the suspension of the Parliament, a special parliamentary task force was constituted.
Yes.
Definitely, there were a lot of procedural improprieties around that area. You had the key accounting committees of Parliament not constituted until recently. And even when they were constituted, we were taken into the place of now there was diversionary tactics. That now these guys have been constituted, now they're simply receiving money, all right, which legally belongs to them. The question of whether it's right or wrong is another whole thing. Why then doesn't the ULS, because the suspension of the committees is a result of the lockdowns. So beyond just visiting the parliament to ask what they can do for us or they can do for the Uganda Law Society, what much more can actually be done to even bring this retrospective justice to the Ugandans who have suffered from this lockdown?
There's been, you see, there are two things. In a lockdown, there's very little you can do. If you call a public official and they tell you they can't move, what are you going to do about it? So right now, what we can do is see what stopgap measures we can put in place during the lockdown. If there are things that we need to bring to the forefront, if there's accountability we need to call for, if there is a court case we're able to file and have progressed during this time, this is what we're doing as Uganda Law Society. If there's somebody we need to bail out, if there is an injustice that we need to bring to the forefront, this is what we do. But outside that, you cannot force a parliamentary sitting in a lockdown.
Is this the time for the Uganda Law Society maybe to call for an amendment in its act to probably, given the unique situation they have seen in a lockdown, to perhaps get much more powers than what have been guaranteed under the law?
But we would need the same parliament to amend this law. We've seen, you see, one of the things that, I'll tell you this, our laws are sufficient. I always tell people, our laws are more than sufficient. The Uganda Law Society Act clearly gives us a very powerful mandate. But a mandate cannot exist unless it's recognized by the state and by the government of the day. We talk about independence of the judiciary, and yes, we've gotten the Administration of Judiciary Act, and now we're very excited. But you see, just the other day, a court order will be given, and it will be ignored by maybe Parliament. Maybe they'll summon a parliamentarian, and the parliamentarian will refuse to go, or maybe they will summon somebody, or they'll stop a land official. We were talking about this in lands, a court order to cancel a title, and the registrar ignores it. So does that mean that the chief seem to respect the systems that we've put in place?
And the lockdown doesn't even help it.
It doesn't help it at all.
All right, now I just want us to broaden the context of this discussion to perhaps focus on even wider professional bodies beyond just the Uganda Law Society. How has the lockdown affected the execution of the mandate of some of the professional associations and bodies?
I think it has greatly affected everybody. We know, for instance, that Uganda Revenue Authority was going through problems trying to convince people to make sure that they file their returns, because filing returns is misunderstood as pay all your taxes. It's really making sure that your records are okay. But which accountants are moving around? Accountants are not essential, the people that would be, we have doctors and nurses, and these are essential, right? But these hospitals have orderlies and people that are supposed to be washing and cleaning these hospitals. They're not mobile. They're not taxis that are driving around. Maybe lawyers might have some level of mobility. Their support staff are not available. We know that the construction sites, the construction companies were allowed. They're essential. But so it's a lockdown. So what a lockdown means is that really, essentially, we are at a standstill economically, and yet we've seen that we bleed money during this time. And for me, the thing that grieves me the most is that the relief, the relief money that is being provided doesn't even seem to be reaching the people it's supposed to be targeting.
I want us to talk about the role of the ULS, especially because I believe there is a social obligation for the Uganda Law Society to even question dominant narratives. One of the things that across the world has been happening, especially with law professional associations, they've been coming out to question dominant narratives. For example, the language that is used during this lockdown. In the regulations, the weaponization of COVID-19 during the pandemic. We have seen instances whereby there has been over-declaration of the numbers. We are not questioning why we are only presented with the numbers of only those who are dying from COVID, those who are recovering. We don't seem to ask those who are dying in the lockdown from other things apart from COVID-19, other challenges, other diseases. What is the role of the Uganda Law Society in questioning some of these dominant narratives?
I think we have questioned these narratives. In the first lockdown, not lockdown, I think around the elections, one of the narratives we questioned was the social distancing thing and using media, using the fourth estate to campaign as opposed to holding rallies and everything. We looked at how the pandemic was being used as a tool to probably keep people from civic, how can I say, from their civic freedoms. We also question the narrative of these regulations, how they're made. And because we question them so vehemently in the first lockdown, I'm glad that this time the right thing is being done, the right processes for the regulations to come out were being followed this time as opposed to the first lockdown. And we saw less clumsiness. In fact, they did not even try to reinvent the wheel. They just reapplied the same regulations. So I feel like there's been progress because we made the right noise at the right time. However, right now there are other narratives that are coming up. And there is also, I must say that you talked about investigative journalism. Our problem during a lockdown is access to information. Who has this information? Because yes, they're going to tell us about the people who are dying, who are getting infected, and we're not. It's only after the lockdown that you hear that pregnant women died because of this. But I want you to know that as Uganda Law Society, we went to court again with SEHAD when the government, when the Ministry of Health started turning maternal health units into COVID sections. That's when we went to court. We said, no, maternal health is an issue. So we were questioning that narrative. It's just that it's not professional of us. We're not even allowed to do it, to think about all the things that we're doing. But we are questioning these narratives on a daily. And that is why the question right now is, if we went into a lockdown, and went in with certain objectives, and those objectives have not been fulfilled, do we need a further lockdown, or should we do things differently? How many lockdowns are we going to have? Why don't we say enough is enough? If vaccination is what we need, let the government prioritize and freeze all spending until we have vaccines in the country. If the issue is to ensure that we have COVID units that are not affecting the services in other aspects of the health sector, then let's create those as permanent COVID units. Then leave the maternal and other ICUs alone, because other people and other patients and other diseases are important as well.
In terms of questioning the narratives, I love the fact that the Uganda Law Society is really doing massive efforts to question But this seems to be really questioning at the periphery. We don't seem to go to the very core.
What's the core for you?
For example, the lockdowns and where they emanated from. We don't seem to question why we adopted as a nation such blanket measures and whether they work for us as a nation, right? Without actually necessarily thinking that because somewhere somebody sitting in the World Health Organization has declared that lockdowns work. We have gotten a few figures and statistics, which most of the times have been manufactured and they've been thrown at us, and then we say, let's get into this.
I disagree. Why? I disagree very strongly. Because Uganda was actually a success story the first time because we overreacted. And our overreaction saved a lot of lives. In a country like this, with our health sector the way it is, we would have perished if we had not overreacted the first time. So I applaud government. That was not a mistake. In fact, countries that took it for granted, like the US, where there
some states in the
no,
US.
listen. In the US, we had a lot of lawyers questioning the whole lockdown thing, and it didn't happen, and people were dying in the thousands. So our government overreacted, and it saved lives because of that. It worked. It was right to do it the first time. The second time, as it was even opening up, they started identifying pockets, pockets of, you remember for a long time the border towns were closed. And that also saved us. And the border towns were not closed out of ignorance. Because what they did is they did that testing. What was it? The random testing, where they found out that we were actually okay within the country. The problem was coming from those that were coming into the borders. So when they closed the border towns, it was an informed decision. Now, the problem was that in loosening up and having this success story, it gave us a false sense of confidence. But we're also getting into an election that we'd never had before in a scientific way. Then there was the excitement. Everybody who had failed to wed and all these things started breaking the law. And I still believe up to this day that the reason Uganda went wrong on COVID is corruption. If it wasn't for corruption, you wouldn't have had people having weddings of 200 people when the law was 70. You know, wouldn't have had funerals of 200 people, 300 people, where this COVID pandemic actually spread more. Because I have a friend who went to bury his dad, and 17 people were infected at that funeral alone during that time. And they lost so many people. These are things that live with us. So I cannot stand here as a responsible leader and say it's a myth or World Health Organization is creating this thing for. No, I do not believe it's a myth. I know that COVID is here. I know that, I suspect, and from everything that has been, that it was probably created. But does it exist? Yes. Is it dangerous? Yes. I have been on the streets of Kampala. The cops are taking bribes from people who they find are not supposed to be moving. So when you see this, I have a friend who told me that the cop told him, hey, now you have a chipapula. Now what will we eat with papulas, you know? So the corruption is letting us let in this disease. Right now, I've been told that there's people that are forging COVID results. What are they called? Slips? COVID result slips. This means that people are deceiving themselves about COVID. If you deceive yourself about a pandemic like this, it's going to spread. So what I would love the government to do at this point is to weed out those loose pockets. Because the corruption, when it comes to medicines, when it comes to enforcing the COVID regulations, because now the first time the army was involved, and I think they had a different approach to COVID. This time looks very different. If you go on the streets of Kampala, it looks very, very different. I actually wonder, I think the Ministry of Works realized it, and you remember that article that came out that they wanted to review all the certificates they had given out for movement. I think they've realized that there's a mistake somewhere, because it doesn't look out there, if you get out, it doesn't look like there's a lockdown happening.
It seems to be only in the president's head.
Well, I would say that, but I know for sure that because of corruption and maybe a false sense of security, we've been a lot more careless this side of the year. And we might unfortunately pay for it. But my greatest disappointment is that these 6 months have not seen us immunize everybody. I mean, vaccinate everybody. If we had at least vaccinated everybody, because it's said, I do not know up to now whether it's 100% true, that you will get COVID when you're vaccinated, but it will not be as bad or as fatal, or it will not even end you up in the ICU if you're vaccinated fully.
Madam President, I take specific caution to the language that the President used on 18th June 2021 when he was closing down the nation for the second time. He specifically stated that we are going in for this lockdown as a temporary measure. We are going to purchase vaccines. Specifically, it talks about Johnson & Johnson, Zyf, I think Pfizer, something like that, and Pfizer and AstraZeneca. Then the most interesting part he talks about is that this lockdown is going to help us actually secure what the NRM government has consolidated and worked for over the past 30 years. The question of politicization of the COVID-19 response in the context of the lockdowns. What does the ULS think about the whole politicization of COVID-19, especially because that was the mind of the president as he was locking us down? He made a strong political statement.
I think in this case, my disappointment, again, is that the objective of this lockdown was for us to grow our numbers in vaccination. I know that the new vaccines came. I know KCCA is currently vaccinating, but then with the limited mobility of people, it would have been nice to see, you know, the first lockdown you saw the army going with food relief to people's homes. It would have been nice for people to, for the, what are they called? The guys immunizing or vaccinating to go to people's homes to target these people, because this 100,000 shillings are supposed to be given to people. I wish that was vaccines being given or Covidex samples, you know, because so this whole Covidex thing, and then it's so expensive. It's being sold at 50,000, 80,000. Yet the government could actually say, we are doing this and we're giving every family maybe this many Covidex containers. Because we cannot handle them in the hospitals. So I think for me, we got distracted from the objective of this lockdown, which was vaccination. And the president clearly put it as you've said. His political statement, I would not address myself to it, because right now I don't see the political benefit. Because what is happening, the economy is down. You understand? The economy is down, people are still dying. What we've seen with Parliament has really disappointed everybody. We've also seen so many clumsy efforts that have made the government really look bad. So I do not see any political benefit that this lockdown has given anybody. Even the opposition has been quite...
You know, we have a tendency...
Because they could have taken advantage of this to grow their... But they've been quite silent during this lockdown. I think
many of them are buying ambulances and doing a lot of things, and even sleeping on job to ask the government the tough questions. Most of them are actually simply benefiting. But, Madam President, we have a tendency in this nation, and I think it is something we have inherited in the wrong way, of comparing ourselves, always using bad examples as the best comparative analysis. So everybody will come and say, well, look here, Uganda is doing so well because Somalia...
It's not.
I'm building up something here. We tend to use the failed or some of the worst examples as our best comparative analysis.
Misery loves company.
Exactly. But now, why don't we talk about the likes of Sweden, which took a bold move and said, look here, we shall not lock down. Why don't we take the boldness in the likes of...
Tanzania didn't lock down, and look what happened.
And I mean, we are seeing what is happening. I think there is massive liberty out there.
And massive death that is unregistered. That's what... Listen.
And I think previously...
one thing I have always loved about Uganda is that we are transparent.
In terms of what?
In terms of deaths and when we have issues. In 1990, when Uganda started actually actively declaring its numbers on HIV, we were able to deal with HIV. We were able to deal with a monster in our living room. While other countries like South Africa, which are highly developed, did the bold thing and said, no, we have HIV, so what? Let's move on. And people perished. So you find that that's why up to now, our doctors are still being consulted by other countries because of their COVID response at the beginning. Now, we might not even see it, but there's a cumulative benefit from the panic that we had at the beginning. And I'm very glad that we panicked, because the panic of our government shows that they knew about their unreadiness to deal with a full-blown pandemic. Of course, Switzerland will say, we are not going to lock down. Have you seen the hospitals in Switzerland? Have you seen the healthcare there, the standards of health services, the ratios of doctors to individuals?
And maybe the discipline of the citizens.
Thank you. Yeah. So, exactly, the discipline of the citizens. So why would we, a country with all the weaknesses we know, close our eyes to our realities? I do not think that's a proper comparison. I would like to throw it out the window with all due respect.
That's the challenge we have in this nation, I think, again, that we are so quick to, to dismiss other things, other probably experiences which have worked for some nations, because we justify our weaknesses, and at times reasonably so. But look here, we haven't had any discussion concerning why we should not take that other path.
Can we first speak about China? So China is was literally the source of COVID, was the first one to be hit. We saw what happened to Wuhan, and then we saw their response. Their response was so severe,
very totalitarian and authoritarian.
And I'm not praising it, but after a while, as we speak right now, China doesn't have COVID because of the steps they took. So different countries reacted differently, and we need to learn from each other. I understand that we need to learn from each other, but I think that one of the things we need to know is that Lord Denning said that the law is like, the English law is like an ox seed and it can grow anywhere. I disagree. You can transplant what happened in Switzerland and put it in Uganda. It doesn't work. I think we need to get whatever we're getting from out there, whether it's a lockdown, whether it's this, and bring it here and use it in a local way, in a way that applies to our local situation. For instance, when we talk about, let me ask you something. Would you have rather in June, in May, and I'm talking as somebody who lost a lot of people that time. Actually, on average, we're losing about 7 lawyers a day, almost, at that time. So would you have rather just said, let's not lock down, what would we have done? What was the alternative? We were not vaccinated. I'm sure Switzerland by now is totally all vaccinated. We don't have healthcare. We don't have medical insurance for the nation. That's something still in the paper. So it's still in some paper on some shelf. We have no oxygen. Just before COVID,
we can say
about 2 years ago, my father was critical in Barra Hospital, and they didn't have oxygen in the whole hospital. So imagine this, and Barra Hospital is the largest hospital in Western Uganda. There's no other hospital like that. So if it doesn't have, and it's a referral hospital, if it doesn't have oxygen, then what are all those people going to do? But now the question is, our nation, is it responding like it knows our situation in this lockdown? Has it ensured, for instance, that we're vaccinated? Has it ensured that that the laws, at least the least we can do, since we're very militarized? I mean, we have a huge army, our defense budget is huge. Why don't we deploy this army to actually do something useful, like go around and what? Like build vaccinate schools, like what they're doing now? No, vaccinate people and distribute Covidex, and ensure also that there's strict, because I feel that our greatest loss during this lockdown has been the weak enforcement of the regulations.
Now, Madam President, again, you talked about the question of Covidex and any other drugs which
might help.
Might help. I know India, for example, invented one, and the World Health Organization refused to declare it as one which was actually certified and approved to help the citizens. The imbalance that comes with the lockdown, especially from the so-called big nations against the small nations. Where we have seen right now, the World Health Organization seems to be controlling, the narrative, trying to suppress. You saw how they made a declaration that Covidex was not the right thing. Even after The National Drug
and
Authority
and the
said...
state had to protect the...
Exactly.
Yes.
Don't you think that this lockdown just pushes us further into the suppression of the bigger nations? We as, a smaller nation?
I think the issue of the bigger nations has never really been an issue of bigger nations. I think the issue is economic.
Mm-hmm.
And there are economic giants that influence organizations even like the World Health Organization, and they're bigger than nations.
Mm-hmm.
And these economic giants have interests. That's why malaria probably will never leave Africa, because they're making a killing from it.
Maybe even HIV.
And yet it's not on other continents, But conspiracy theories aside, we all know that healthcare has been commercialized world over. Actually, big pharma is a big deal all over the world. Not in Uganda. I wouldn't say in Uganda because we're still first of all, our people rarely go to hospitals unless they're really dying because they don't even have trust in those things. But big pharma all over the world has been behaving what you're saying. I don't think a lockdown has made them better in this way. Maybe what you are saying is that because you see, when we're locked down, it doesn't mean our governments are locked down, they're working. What is the government of Uganda doing? Instead of having NDA fighting the guy and they're in court, this is just a distraction. By now they should have given them orders. Ministry of Health should have purchased enough load to just load every hospital and every dispensary and every, and distribute these things. Right now we should be interested in how many families have access to Covidex. Maybe every 200 meters you should be able to get a center, a health center or something that has Covidex there, because we know very well that people are going to get COVID. That is for sure. We know very well that we don't have vaccines, so we're not going to be sure that people are vaccinated. So if you're sure that people are going to get sick and you have a cure, it's to make sure that people have access to it. And that is what we should all be calling for.
Now, Madam President,
with our homegrown solution, let's chill the World Health Organization.
I picked specific interest in the language that you used, which I've seen actually spread out in the media massively, where they call people with alternative views, especially those which don't seem to agree with the so-called government narrative, conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, fascist people, and all these kind of things.
No, I call it a conspiracy theory because if I say Big Pharma has always done this, someone will say will hold me to strict proof. So I'll call it as conspiracy theory.
It a conspiracy
but we know that
it's
been proven in courts that Big Pharma benefits from pandemics. Every so and so someone creates a virus, experimentally and let it loose. And we know that there's some sick people out there, some sick rich people out there. But so when I say conspiracy, I'm not dismissing them because these are my theories. I've just been
that's
I
the
am
language
owning them. I'm owning them, but I'm calling them conspiracy theories because that's what they would respond as.
Now, Madam President, I want us to get into the conclusion of this discussion. One of the things that has stood out evidently in this lockdown is the closure, for example, of places of worship, places which inherently as a people we would give hope, we'd enjoy ourselves in. I would think, as a matter of fact, that, for example, places of worship will be centers that contribute to psychiatric assistance in this nation. Because,
I think they are.
Because most of them, and I'm getting to my question, Madam President. You are a Christian lawyer.
Yes, I am.
You're one who has openly professed your faith. Don't you think that this lockdown is an affront, a direct affront to actually your freedom of worship?
What I would respond is we needed bigger voices. We needed the church to have a louder voice of hope. We needed to see what the church is doing. We needed to see we needed to see more prayer. We had a day of prayer, I think.
The national prayer day.
But we need to see the church coming out to give hope. We need the church to come out and get all their resources and also contribute to helping their communities. I think that it's also a time for all our leaders really to go back to the source, to the rock from which we are hewn, and and even find answers to COVID, because this COVID thing is a spiritual thing more than it's a physical thing.
Yeah.
So what is it? What is it? Is it a punishment? Is it an answer? Is it a sign of the end? Are we ready? Do we even know what's going on? And I believe that the silence I hear from the church right now is a sign that either we're distracted or maybe people are listening.
And maybe really as we get to the conclusion of all this, you talked about the prophetic voices which have arisen. I know for a fact that Prophet Elvis Mbonye, I followed through on his social media platforms. He has come out, for example, to declare the course that the nation needs to take in this particular time. I think we have all seen the banter, the social media banter that has come out. Perhaps you haven't followed the banter that has come out to say, you know, the dismissive banter really, say, well, you shouldn't think about that. Let's think about this other path. Do you think then, as the body of Christ, we have authentic voices, which are maybe beyond even that, that have arisen, but the church has remained asleep, the church has not paid attention, and perhaps the church has simply said, we will not listen to those, we shall choose our own way?
But you see, the Jews killed Christ. It says a prophet is never, what do you call it, appreciated
honored
in his own
country.
The truth has never been popular. So I do not think that if Jesus, whom we follow, went through all that rejection, we should expect any less if we have a message from
then
God.
where does it put us as a nation if we reject? I think
we're
saw
human.
the benefits of rejecting.
Look here. Let's never forget that we're human. And let's stop quipping this whole, you know, Christians and children of God have never really been in the habit of listening to God.
Okay. Could this be the time for us to be tested to listen to God?
Yeah, this is the time we need to listen. This is the time, and hard times like this have, you know, it says that when sin abounds, should we give up? No, grace abounds even more. Do you then
think this is the time for us actually to heed the prophetic counsel that comes from authentic voices?
I think this is the time to get back to the feet of Christ. Each of us individually.
I love the example in the Bible which talks about the rich man and Lazarus. And the instance whereby this rich man goes up and he's in hell, he's suffering, calls for, can Lazarus help me? And I love the response of the Lord. He said, but I've sent you prophets, you've rejected them. I've sent you these people. Do you think then, as the body of Christ, I mean, Christ knew that he was there. Perhaps he would have asked probably the rich man to touch his feet. But do you think we're in that place still as the body of Christ, where men of God have been sent to us?
You see, men of God are going to be sent. Men of God are going to be sent. The word of God is also there, speaking daily. Our relationship with God, when you pray, let me tell you, you're going to leave this room, you know right from wrong already. You know right from wrong, but you still choose wrong. You know? I feel that, so yes, we are going to do these things, but I think for me, my discomfort is in blaming you for my spiritual relationship, weakness or failure, because God has actually given us a lot of power. So my call today would be, let's turn away from our ways. This corruption is killing us. Let's turn away from the hypocrisy of pointing at other people as opposed to looking at the log in our eyes. Let's turn away from asking what our government can do for us as opposed to what we can do even for our communities as we stand. And he will hear. At least he gives us that guarantee. So I cannot speak for the people of Uganda, but I can speak and say that there's a promise. There's a promise for the people of Uganda. There is hope. And if we actually turn away and we call on his name, we shall be saved. Yes.
And as a nation, once we exalt Christ above everything, then we are sure that we are preserved and protected.
Yes, yes. I just need you to understand that when they say nation, I think they mean each of us. Because the beauty with God, and I've had this conversation, sorry, maybe I'll sound really, really fanatic if I say this, but the beauty with this relationship with God is that God loved Abraham enough to save the whole of Sodom and Gomorrah if there was one person that was righteous. He sent angels just to save Lot and his wife and his children before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. And how serious was he about Sodom and Gomorrah? It's under the Dead Sea right now. There's nothing that can live in the water that's over Sodom and Gomorrah. But God was willing to undo, to hold back his hand because of his relationship with Abraham. So where does my comfort come from? The whole nation of Uganda does not have to heed. Just one, just you. You can heed. You can build that relationship with God, and your prayer is enough to save this whole nation. I
mean, Madam President, it's been a very exciting conversation. I just want to give you a minute.
I can't believe you started me out on that preaching money now.
No. And I think that brings out the beauty of such conversations. And that's why this platform exists. But Madam President, I'll just give you 1 minute for your parting shot as the President of the Uganda Law Society. This will be airing out when the President will be addressing the nation on the way forward. I just want to ask you a quick question. Do you think this lockdown should be lifted? Should it end?
I think it needs to be lifted in phases. I hope that they've done research. It would be good for them to communicate what are the hot pockets of infections. For instance, if the hot pockets are, because we saw that in the last lockdown, I liked what they did in the last lockdown, that they opened up in phases and they were making informed decisions. If they found out the border posts were dangerous, they left those closed. Right now our airport has been open. I think that's a big issue, but again, with our airports closed, maybe the economy would come to a standstill. So I think that, I hope that they are going to make informed decisions. I do not want the lockdown to continue as it is. I do not think it's healthy for the economy, but neither do I think we are using it well when we're getting we've not gotten the vaccines anyway. So I hope that first of all we can get the vaccines. Second of all, we can make informed decisions, identify hot pockets, have a criteria for identifying and locking down those areas. Whenever, especially when we see increased infections. But I also think that we need to see security more involved in enforcement of SOPs, as opposed to just, arresting people and regulations, but SOPs, workplaces, are they prepared? Because, people are desperate, people are poor, people, the Employment Act says that you have a right to not show up for work if your environment is not safe, but you will not eat if you don't. So there's a lot of people that are going to show up for work in work environments that are going to be dangerous to them. I hope that the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Gender and Labor and health and public health officials all over the country are going to actually inspect places of work to ensure that our people are protected. Amazing. That has been Mrs. Pheona Wall. Nabasa, thank you so much for joining us tonight, making off time. It has been a very exciting. It's been a tough one. I mean, you are a very tough person. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And I know that you're going to enjoy this series and see you in the next part of the Unmasked series. The good Lord bless you all.